So good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Integrity 365 webinar on income protection, a key insurance benefit that has become even more valuable in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. Our guest speaker this evening is Coreena Dutton, a colleague of mine and a fellow chartered financial planner. She is going to be underlining the importance of having adequate financial protection in place, especially in the difficult economic climate with the increasing cost of living, and we'll explain how income protection works and, amongst other things, use case studies to illustrate the benefits. As you may know, this is one of a series of webinars that we are running, and like others will be recorded, so that should you wish to return to it again in future, you can do so. It will find its way onto our website in approximately a week or so. And if you navigate there, you'll be able to find it amongst the other webinars that we've recorded. We have planned some time at the end to answer questions and would welcome any questions that you might have. So please do forward these to us, which you can do either by using the Q&A button or the chat feature. And if for any reason we do have questions that we can't get to, we'll make sure to reply directly to those people that have asked after the webinar. Okay, without any further ado, I'm going to hand over to Coreena and she'll take us through the presentation.
Hello, hi everyone. Thanks, Nick, much appreciated. So a lot of you may well know me or have heard of me. There's probably a few of my clients and other people listening, and just wanted to say hello and thanks for joining us. We're going to be covering a few different areas today. We're going to be looking at the cost of living crisis and life without protection. We're going to look at how protection can help in the current climate. We're also going to be looking at some real life examples of how income protection in particular works. And then we're going to be answering some questions on financial protection. So as Nick mentioned, if you've got any questions, just put them in the chat box or the Q&A box as we go along, and we'll try and answer as many as we can. So first of all, I'm just going to have a look at a few stats. Basically, the cost of living crisis so far, many people are sort of looking for ways to reduce spending and stretch their finances, because obviously inflation is rocketing at the moment. Annual inflation jumped to 9% in April, which is the highest level since 1982. It's driven by soaring prices of necessities like gas, electricity and food. The biggest upward pressure came from the cost of housing and utilities following the outbreak of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, and also the increase in the UK's energy price cap. Gas prices soared to 95.5%, electricity prices 53.5%, and the cost of transport continued to increase, with average petrol prices reaching a record of 161.8p per litre in April. And that was up from 125.5 a year earlier, so crazy increases. Inflation also accelerated for restaurants and hotels, up 8%. And then food and non-alcoholic beverages, which were up 6.7%. So, you know, absolutely mad when it comes to what we were looking at last year. And this is why we're all experiencing such problems. So some future estimates then. The Bank of England expect inflation to peak at 10.2% in the final quarter of 2022 and remain high for the next 2 years. The energy regulator Ofgem has warned that the energy price cap will surge to £2,800 in October, and that's up more than £1,500 since March, piling on more pressure on strained household finances. And then the Resolution Foundation estimates that the typical household income will fall by about £1,000 this year once the effect of inflation is accounted for. And that's the biggest drop in incomes in real terms since the mid-1970s. So I guess what I wanted to cover now is looking at a bit more detail about when things do go wrong. Really depressing, but it's things that are happening more often. You know, so we're sort of going down the route of a job loss scenario here, and it's really just giving us a bit more indication as to what could happen. So in the first 3 months of being unable to work, somebody might have to stop buying branded goods. They might have to reduce their TV package. They might have to apply for universal credit. In the next 3 months, they might have to cancel their TV package, cancel any non-essential insurance policies. So that could be things like mobile phones, pet and white goods cover, and then miss their first car repayment. They might also have to contact their mortgage provider to explain that they're struggling. By month 7 and 9, they might be unable to afford to give their child a birthday party. They might have reached their credit card limit, and they may have had to contact Citizens Advice to discuss debt options. Between months 10 and 12, they may have had a very lean Christmas, missed their first council tax payment, and had their car repossessed. So really depressing statistics, apologies, but this is just what could happen. The ONS data estimates that the average UK household expenditure is £2,548 a month. So if the main earner on an annual salary of £45,000 is unable to work, debt could soon build. Even with 2 months employer sick pay and statutory sick pay, they could accumulate £23,000 of debt within 12 months. And that's if the expenditure remained the same. So, you know, an absolutely obscene amount of money that could accumulate during that time. So the next slide then is really just looking at whether protection could help. So income protection is a specific product that's designed to help in this kind of scenario. Now, obviously, you know, it wouldn't necessarily help in the event of a job loss, but it could help in the event of actual illness, which is, you know, on a lot of our minds nowadays, especially following on from the effects of COVID. So as the cost of living crisis triggers the biggest fall in real income since the mid-1970s, protection is the last thing you should do without. Arguably, income protection is the most important insurance someone of working age can buy. So if your income ceases because of ill health, whether physical or mental, you may soon deplete your savings and be unable to cover your expenses, making income protection an indispensable lifeline. So these two examples here will basically show us what would happen without income protection. So obviously you can see the savings line free falling, and obviously, you know, the income just going altogether. But with income protection, potentially, yes, you may need to spend some of your savings, but because income protection will kick in at the right point, then, you know, you've got some cover there. So some important points to note. So income protection insurance pays you a regular income if you can't work because of sickness or disability, and it continues until you return to paid work or you retire. Income protection is also known as permanent health insurance. So some of you may have come across that description instead. The amount of income you're allowed to claim, it won't replace the exact amount of money you were earning before you had to stop work. You can expect to receive about half or 2/3 of your earnings before tax from your normal job. And this is because some money will be taken off for the state benefits that you could be entitled to, and also the income that you can get from an income protection policy is tax-free. You can't claim income protection payments straight away. So if you fall ill or become disabled, you usually have to wait a minimum of 4 weeks. This is known as a deferred period. You can set the deferred period to meet your requirements. So payments can start up to 2 years after you stop work. This is because you might not need the money straight away. You might get sick pay from your employer, or you might be able to claim statutory sick pay for up to 28 weeks. Some income protection policies pay for a set period of time per illness. So for example, up to 2 years, but most pay until you're either able to return to work or you reach retirement age. There are other types of illness insurance as well, such as critical illness cover. And you should always compare income protection insurance with other types of illness insurance before you decide to buy it. So again, another really important reason to get independent financial advice. So we're going to start to look at some examples of what may or may not happen in the event of somebody getting ill. So we're going to look at Gary, first of all. So Gary had a very stressful job. He didn't have any sick pay through his employer. He generally found himself working at weekends. He was married with kids and drove into the city for work. So what happened to Gary was there was a sort of behaviour change that was noted by some of his colleagues and his friends. He went to see the doctor as a result of having a conversation with some friends, and he was given some counselling and medication. Turns out Gary was severely depressed, and he was offered a sick note. Now, in Gary's scenario, his financial situation before he was able to, he got ill, was that he was on an annual salary of £65,000, and he had monthly expenditure of £45,000 per annum, so about £865 per week. In the event of Gary not being able to work due to his illness, he had no sick pay by his employer. So he was entitled to statutory sick pay of a grand old amount of £99.35 per week. There's not many of us that could live on that. And in Gary's case, that's a £766 shortfall for 28 weeks. He may be entitled to further benefits after 28 weeks, but the amount's going to be of a similar level. So certainly not enough to live on in Gary's scenario. So without protection in place, Gary's income is drastically reduced, and he faces increased levels of stress due to his financial situation, which puts on an added strain on his mental health. And that's what he's off work trying to deal with. So not good situation at all. So if we then look at Sophie. Sophie was the manager of a large company. She worked about 80 hours per week, including lots of driving. She had a husband, and luckily she sought some advice from a financial advisor regarding what could happen in the event of not being able to work. She was worried about the fact that she might not have enough money. So with regards to Sophie's scenario, her job involved a lot of driving, and on her way home from work, she felt a bit strange. The next thing she knew, she woke up after having a stroke at the wheel at the age of 42. Now, luckily, she had 6 months full sick pay. So she had 6 months without having to worry. And then as she'd seen a financial advisor, she had already set up an income protection policy, luckily, to pay her a monthly income, which covered her bills. Now, sadly, she had to leave her job, and she can now only work part-time doing something completely different. And the reason for that is lasting fatigue and the inability to concentrate for long periods of time. However, she now receives a proportionate benefit of income protection, and she's obviously unable to do her original role, but she can still afford the bills because she's got adequate cover. So if we look at Sophie's story in a bit more detail, her financial situation, she was on an annual salary of 82,000. She had monthly expenditure of 50,000 per annum, so about £961 a week. And her sick leave income after she had her illness, so obviously she had 6 months full sick pay, and then her income protection kicked in after that 6 months period, which paid her a monthly income, and that's 65% of original income, so just over £1,000 a week after 6 weeks. So that obviously more than covers her bills. And continuing support, now she's working part-time, so she does receive a part-time income, but the income protection still pays her a proportionate benefit as well, and that's enough to make sure she's got enough to cover her bills, which is great news. So in summary, I just wanted to go through a few things. So income protection is the guarantee of your greatest asset. So should you be unable to work due to illness or injury, it helps cover monthly outgoings. It acts as a lasting source of support, allowing you to maintain your standard of living, and also preserve any hard-earned savings that you may have, which could be used to cover financial commitments. So many have felt a tightening of the belt, but certain age groups are feeling the pinch more than others. So in March, they did a study by the UCL, and it found that 38% of UK adults said they were worried about their finances, with the figures nearly reaching half for those aged 30 to 39. Unfortunately, this age range happens to be the most common age group for people claiming on income protection policies, with the average age of a claimant in the UK being 37 years old. So whilst it's maybe considered beneficial but not essential, it's even more necessary in times of rising prices to help maintain your financial security when a drop in income could otherwise have severe consequences. So I think that's pretty much me done. I think we're going to sort of have a conversation regarding some questions that may have come in, and then we can look at it in a bit more detail, Nick.
Thanks, Coreena. Really important message. There have been 3 questions already. The first one, I think you touched upon this, but it might be worth exploring in a bit more detail.
Yeah.
It was around the level of cover, and the question, put simply, is why can't I cover 100% of my income?
Okay, so I mean, the main reason for that is that the benefits are paid tax-free. So obviously we don't, well, the government won't want you in a better position not working than working. The other thing is also you're entitled to some statutory benefits, as I mentioned. So obviously that combined means that there's usually a cap as to the amount you can get for income protection. So it depends on the provider, but usually sort of 2/3 or around 65% of your gross income can be covered with an income protection policy.
Okay, and I guess that makes it important to shop around. Then different providers might offer different cover in different scenarios.
Absolutely, yeah, people have got different forms of income, there's different products, different providers. Yeah, absolutely, really important, because the other thing to bear in mind is, for example, if you have a change in circumstances, so if you were earning 60 grand a year, for example, doing a particular job, and then you decided to, you know, have a change in circumstances and do something else where you're earning 30%, sorry, £30,000, the income protection won't pay you more than that percentage of your income before you get ill. So if you take a cut in income for whatever reason, it's really important to make sure that your income protection is updated. And the same with a rise in income, because otherwise you might be paying for cover that you wouldn't be able to claim on, or you might be paying for cover that's not going to be enough.
Brilliant. Yeah, and that's one of our key messages, isn't it? To continue to review things. We know that things will change for our clients over time, and even something that looks as simple as an insurance policy, continuing to review whether it's life changes or events that happen outside your control.
Absolutely.
The second question that came in, very topical. Does my income protection insurance cover me for COVID-19? That might be to do with a specific policy somebody already has, so it might be a difficult one to answer. But if I rephrase that, would income protection generally cover you for COVID-19?
Yeah, I mean, generally income protection covers any illness. So, you know, it doesn't have, you know, specific exclusions. Having said that, it might have an exclusion depending on the person's health. So, for example, if somebody applied for income protection and they had a back problem, the income protection provider might want to exclude any problems as a result of that back problem, because obviously it's more likely to happen. But there's no specific exclusion on a certain type of illness unless there's a problem with it when someone applies. So it would pay out in the event of COVID. However, bearing in mind that income protection has a deferred period, so usually a minimum 4-week deferred period. So is COVID going to last more than 4 weeks? Depends, I guess. I mean, some people have got long COVID and problems with that, but generally speaking, income protection is designed for longer term illnesses as opposed to sort of short term illnesses.
Okay, brilliant. And a question which I presume has come from a business owner: can income protection cover dividend income? I assume this is where a director perhaps structures their income to be a certain amount of salary that's tax efficient, and then dividends on top for the balance. I presume it wouldn't cover income for dividend income from a stocks and shares portfolio, for example.
Yeah, so yeah, it sounds like it's a business owner. So yeah, quite often it's really common for a director of a business or an owner of a business to take a low salary and then take the rest of their income as dividends. And if that is the case, then absolutely that dividend income can be included within an income protection policy. However, it will probably only be included on something like an executive income protection policy, which is paid for by the business as opposed to the individual. Again, a really good reason to make sure you get advice to make sure that you've got the right product, but it is possible, absolutely. But yeah, you wouldn't be able to cover dividend income from a share portfolio or something like that. It would only be dividend income from a business really that could be covered. Okay,
brilliant. We have had a final question come in, and again it relates to something you said. I think you covered it in a bit of detail, but it might be worth expanding. And the question is, what's the difference between critical illness cover and income protection?
Okay, so income protection will pay a percentage of your income as a monthly income in the event of you not being able to work, and that can be for any reason. So if you go to the GP and you're signed off for any reason, be it stress, broken leg, back problem, whatever it is, if you're signed off from the GP as unable to do your job, then income protection will pay that percentage of your income after the deferred period. Now, critical illness cover is a bit different. So critical illness cover, it can pay an income or it can pay a lump sum, and that is paid on diagnosis of a specific critical illness. And again, it depends wildly on the cover that you've got and the provider that you've got. But for example, there'll be like a document detailing all of the joyous critical illnesses you could expect to potentially claim on. And if, for example, it was something such as a heart attack or a certain severity of cancer or something along those lines, then critical illness cover could pay out. But income protection is it's linked to your income. So obviously it's depending on how much income you were earning before, where critical illness cover, you can kind of have whatever cover you want in theory. And B, it will pay if you're signed off as unable to do your job, for whatever reason. However, there are a couple of sort of caveats I would have there. So with income protection, you can set it up on a different basis. You can either have own occupation or you can have any occupation. So, for example, if you were doing an active job, if you were sort of somebody that was always, up ladders and doing, something really active, and you all of a sudden got a back problem and went to the GP, the GP might say, well, look, there's no way you could do your job as a roofer, for example, because of your back problem. So, if you had a policy that was set up on an own occupation basis, then potentially that would, pay out. However, if the GP said, well, look, yes, you can't do your job as a roofer, but you could sit in an office, for example, then potentially if you had a policy which was set up on an any occupation basis, it might not be as easy to claim. So again, a really important reason to make sure that you get advice for the cover that you need.
Brilliant, really interesting, really valuable information. I think that actually concludes all the questions. So unless there's anything further you want to add, I think we should draw it to a close there. I just want to remind people they can either share the webinar with friends or colleagues or point them towards it should they wish to. You can view this one. It will take about a week for us to get the copy onto our website. And if you have any questions that arise after viewing the webinar, please feel free to contact us.
Brilliant. Thanks ever so much. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.